This video is about our patch 1.0.60. This patch is a extended test from our test period in January. The point of this test is to be testing an amendment onto the tree structure system. We are planning on adding 3 new abilities to the mastery tree while keeping the overall opportunity point cost percent roughly the same. This test will be done on only one spec per faction, with those being the Ironbreaker versus the Phyta, which is kind of a callback to our original first phase 3 test. The reason we're only doing one is because there is only about 3 days from the point that we collated all of our feedback from the January test until Saturday, when the content and the extended test period will be done, and we don't have enough time to do that for roughly 50 specializations. So the result and feedback of this test on one spec per side will be the test that determines the likelihood of this being done to the other 70 hard specializations. So if you like this system or don't like this system whenever you test it out, please let us know. Since it's going to be over the previous mastery tree versus the new mastery tree, I'm going to go over how the current and or previous master tree functions. So normally you have 3 nodes here at the top, which basically determine your hard specialization. And since we're doing Phyta versus Ironbreaker, I'm going to do this with the Phyta tree. So you click those, hit train, and it opens up your mastery tree for the Phyta. The first row here is just all of your free abilities that you get for leveling. Because I'm already max level, I can get all of them. As you can see, they are free. They don't cost anything whatsoever. You get 8 core abilities plus 1 of each adrenaline. Then after that, you get to the rest of the tree, which is broken down into tiers. Basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And you have 31 points available in order to spend on all these. The first tree is usually just a bunch of passives and stat nodes, with 8 passive ranks and 20 stat nodes. Once you spend 5 points in a tier, it opens up the next tier. You do not have to spend like 5 points in this tier once you have previous ones. So for example, now that I'm at 10, it opens up tier 3. Obviously, you can't buy things that are red. You have to wait until they pop up to be green. Tier 2 has stat nodes and rank 1 and 2 adrenalines that are specific to the hard specialization. 3 has 3 tactics, 2 abilities. 4 has 7 passives, 1 ability, and 2 tactics. 5 has 6 passives, 1 adrenaline, and 2 tactics. And then 6 has 4 ranks of passive, 1 career tactic, 1 renown tactic, 1 adrenaline 4, and 1 ability, with the last tier being what we call the capstone, where you could only have 1 point left to spend on either your Zergbuster or another ability. That everything on this tree currently costs 1 point, and the stat nodes themselves they have diminished returns, so like 100 and 85, and this is left over from when we used to have racial stats. The reason why I bring up the last couple things is because some of those things are going to change in the new tree to keep the opportunity cost percent the same. And this is the new tree. And the first thing you'll notice is that the A node, the universal badge that brings power above that of regular mortals, has been moved up to the top rather than second tier on the tree here. It's mostly just the quality of life, because this node is required in order for your character to actually function and to bring up stats. So we'll click that, join the fighter. You'll notice right off the rip that you have 43 points available, up from 31. This is because now it's going to cost 7 points per tier, up from 5 to unlock the next tier. So it basically requires 5 points placed here in order to get this to access, and then 14, and so on and so forth. The core abilities and adrenalines are still exactly the same. They have not changed. Exists on these nodes for tiers 1, 2, and 3 are all the same, with the only difference being that stats no longer have diminishing returns. They give 60 points per point you spend. one of the reasons is that we're removing that old nod to racial stats, which we had actually removed about 10 patches ago. Also, we're reducing the value of 1 point buys, so buying like 1 point in agility to get 100 agility and therefore 10 action points per second. And also, because of us adding 2 points per tier, you're basically going to have to buy 4 stat nodes, almost guaranteed for any class, just because in these first 2 right here, there's only 8 passives and 2 adrenaline, then the rest are stat nodes. So you're buying a minimum of 4 of them, if not more, depending on if you want those passives or not. Tier 4 is where you see your first structure, like additional change. We added 1 ability there. So for the Phyta, that would be Little Swing here. The scrap mechanic that you're going to see in this video and this test for the Phyta is going to happen regardless of whether or not we actually do the add 3 abilities thing. So this is just going to be your first instance of seeing scrap. It is intended to be put and built into the rest of the class, or the rest of this spec in general. So scrap is not specific to what we're looking for in the feedback of this test. But this was one of the first abilities that you get. It's a tier 4 1 ability, additional ability that you had before. Originally, you only had 1, which for Phyta was Follow Me Lead. Now you have 2. Tier 5 is where the other change is. You'll now have 2 abilities where you had no choices for abilities before. And here's the other side of the scrap mechanic, the first little component of it that we're showcasing in addition to this, just because we had to come up with those additional abilities for this test. You'll also notice right here that it says 3 points. That is another cost, or another change, is that abilities that aren't in the free tree, which are cost 0, including those in tier 3, now cost 3 points. And this is one of the ways that we maintain the same level of opportunity costs throughout the tree. Abilities are now costing 3 points, but each tier is now requires 7 points to go up from 5, and you have those 12 additional points to spend, right? So essentially, what this all means is that you can build the same exact builds that you were building before on the old tree, as long as you ignore the newly added abilities. Or you can take, instead of taking Follow Me Lead, you could have taken Little Swing. So as long as you don't add additional abilities over the 13 you could normally would have gotten. However, you can choose to buy the additional abilities, have 14, 15, or 16 abilities at the cost of 3 points that you would have been able to spend in passives and tactics. And this was put in tiers 4 and 5 in order to create the same, because the higher up you go into the tier of a specialization, the more useful and powerful passives they are. So in order to get these abilities, you have to give up your components that you may have enjoyed before, which makes the system more about adding choice to what you can do rather than increasing the power across the board of every class. Now, there are a couple of rules or guidelines that we have placed on ourselves as designers related to this system amendment, related to these abilities, if the system amendment should get further implementation. Number 1, none of the abilities that are added can be off the GCD. Number 2, added abilities should not be toggles or overall function in a passive manner. The reason for these first 2 rules is because the opportunity cost for them is passive and tactics. We don't want things that essentially function like a passive or tactic just so that you can have another button to press on occasion. Number 3, abilities may not violate existing guidelines on defensives, mobility, or CC per assigned role. So, for example, if you are playing a bruiser, right, that is slow with high defensives and damage, none of these abilities are going to increase your mobility because your mobility is an intended weakness of that goal. Just same line. It's very unlikely that any of these abilities added to any specialization are likely to be a crowd control, because we already apply the maximum number of crowd controls a spec can have according to its design philosophies in most circumstances. Don't quote me that it'll be all, but it pretty much won't, was unlikely. And then number 4, the abilities should expand on lesser used components of the spec instead of furthering its existing strengths. Examples of these would be things like Knight Assassin having more abilities to use with their crossbow. And if you took those, you would no longer be able to do the kind of significant bursts that they can do because you're giving up those passives that make your damage do more damage in melee so that you can have those ranged options. A couple more examples of things like improving the melee ability selections for Shadow Warrior and Shuda, who currently only have about 2 abilities each for actually being in melee. Or the system that we're doing on the Ironbreaker, where you have ability to get more restoration power for Shell Shocked and your Bubble, through something that's not the tactic Oath of Reclamation. You can actually press a button to gain more restoration power rather than using a tactic that's based off how much armor you have, right? And then by pressing that button, you're not pressing something like Heavy Blow. And of course, the Black Orc, who just in general needed more abilities to be able to use in the clobbering time and not in clobbering time. Those are some examples that we have thought up in just like the couple days when we were discussing whether or not we should even do this test. But basically, this is what the system that we're going to be testing on Saturday is, and we'd love to see those of you that are already testers show up, look at the tree, make choices on it, and give us feedback on whether or not this system should be implemented across the board, or whether or not what you feel like you're giving up just to have these extra abilities is not worth it. We look forward to seeing you guys on Saturday.